what's going
Sound good.
so it's really just a chill conversation. So like usually Chaz will be here and like just introduce AJC. If not, we'll have JP do it. And then I'll ask y'all like, what is your experience? What is a lens that you're looking through to be able to talk about like policing? Like, why should we give a shit about like you, right? Like, what is the thing that you bring to the conversation? And then after that, we will go around and I'll ask like, what do you think of when you're thinking about trauma and policing based on your experience? Like, what comes to mind for you, or what makes up your framework of understanding trauma and policing? And then this just go like that, and it'll be chill, and we'll like have a conversation. And usually after the first hour, hey JP, are you with us now?
Yeah, sorry about that. This is kind of weird. We're actually live streaming already.
Yeah, I saw that.
Before broadcasting, which is anyway, it threw me off, but just giving everyone a heads up.
Will you make us co-hosts?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll just be like, what is trauma and policing? Then after we have a good bit of that conversation, usually about the first hour, we'll invite people in who are participants who are in chat, who are making really good comments or like have good questions, seem like they have good insight. We'll invite them in and to be panelists with us for a minute, and then like kind of rotate folks.
Love it.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you all for participating. Here we go. Broadcast.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I know about this early situation, JP.
Oh yeah, that's true. We have 2 minutes still. We got 1 minute.
I'm gonna see if I can't find the Reddit thread that talks about police brutality, because I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people who don't necessarily know the scope.
All right, we got some participants pouring in, just getting started here. I'll give everyone some time. No rush, we're early.
And I'm mostly going to try to stay off looking at things online, because when I do that, my Zoom gets really slow. So, where is it?
Okay.
Here we are.
I am also going
to. Also, JP's screen freezes a whole lot. So like right when JP like does this really cool thing where he like starts to lay the foundation for a super dope like framework or a super dope insight, and then like he'll lay the foundation, and then that's when the computer will be like, well, next time. Yes. So that's the thing that will happen.
My computer is literally the police.
Yeah.
Oh, good. We'll make it work.
All right, Jay, I got you a new name.
Hey, appreciate you.
Yeah.
I will also be sharing a video at one point.
Yeah. Do we want to do that? Is Chaz going to show up and like play his little thing? No, we're rogue.
Yeah, we're rogue.
We're doing whatever we want. This is great. Yeah. You can now we can definitely drink beer.
I can play that video though. If we
want.
Let's
do it.
All right.
We've got questions
here.
Also, yes, Whitney, there are previous webinars in the series available. I think that they're on AJC's website. If you are able to put a link in chat at some point in time during this convo, that would be awesome. Thank you.
For sure, yeah, I will definitely share the page. All right, I'm loading up the video here and then we'll get started.
So welcome everyone. It looks like we're gonna have an intimate conversation this time. Totally cool. We are encouraging people to put questions or observations or whatever comes up for y'all in chat, so that we can engage with you a little bit later, and y'all can be able to talk to each other. We feel like one of the things that's important is to be able to connect people and their experiences here. Talking about trauma, like trauma bonding is real, and being able to like speak with other folks about your shared experiences is really helpful, in being able to create resilience and just like heal.
Imagine a world without police. No, seriously. Close your eyes. What does that world look like? Is that a world without prisons, with better school systems, with no racism? Do you long for peace and justice, safety? If so, how do we get there? How do we work with the end in mind?
All right. Here we go.
Thanks, JP. Do you want to tell them about AJC and what y'all do?
Yeah.
Now more than ever, Black and Latinx communities need their well-being and their lives.
My apologies.
We've been
YouTube. All right. Yes. So, yeah. So the Austin Justice Coalition is a grassroots group of organizers, community organizers here in Austin, Texas. We do both policy work and kind of direct work in the community. We are a racial justice group focused on racial liberation for Black and Brown people in a time of systemic oppression in America, which is all the time. We've been hosting these conversations now for about 5 weeks. For 5 weeks, this is our 5th conversation. And the idea is where we really start to do the work of imagining beyond reform, beyond trying to fix police, but really trying to think bigger and outside of police, and also trying to understand all the ways in which harmful and toxic police culture kind of shapes our communities and our world. So I'm excited for this conversation. I'm looking forward to joining y'all.
Dope. Thank you, JP. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Owen. I'm a social worker, anti-racist educator and advocate. I am really excited to see y'all and to share this platform today and to be able to have this really deep conversation. I feel like it's very needed when we're having a conversation, a larger conversation around defunding the police or abolishing the police or what needs to happen. It's really important to understand like what it is that police do and how they do it and what happens when they are doing it. So really, really excited to have this conversation. We've got Sam and Jay, both people who we haven't met before, so we're excited to get to know both of y'all. And we'll just go ahead and get started. So I'll start. My name is Nikia. Like I said, I did I do this every single time, and I don't know why I lose my words. I got the first 7 divisions of APD through the equity tool, working with the equity office for the city of Austin, and that particular pilot. And I've also been through the Citizen Police Academy, mostly to be able to understand more about policing so that I can give better critique around policing before the conversation became one of abolishment, which I am definitely in favor of. So that's the lens that I'm kind of using for today and that I lose in my work around policing. Sam, can you let us know about how you've come to this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks to AJC for having me on. Yeah, my name is Sam, and I'm here because I was a victim of police brutality when I was protesting police brutality on May 31st. So on I-35, I was shot in the face with a less lethal round, and you know that's caused all sorts of problems for me. Obviously, a lot of broken bones. Permanent vision loss, nerve damage, a lot of things that I don't even probably know yet. And so, I whatever I can do, whatever questions you guys have about just kind of the details, I think a lot of the things kind of get lost in terms of you see somebody gets injured, but you don't really know how bad it is or what they were doing before they were, before less lethal rounds were used on them, and did they deserve it or whatever. So
thanks, Sam. Jay, can you let us know what your lens is coming in?
Just like Sam said, like, you know, I want to appreciate first and foremost AJC for even having me on here, so to kind of like, you know, amplify my voice in a way, and to kind of be the voice of people that were on the grounds from the beginning of these protests, following Mike Ramos and George Floyd. I can kind of resonate with Sam was saying, because I was out there too. I was also shot that same day in my throat. By APD. I've been brutalized on multiple occasions by APD since I've been out there protesting. So kind of having like a firsthand experience for anybody that, you know, is looking for having an open ear to what really goes down when we're out there, and kind of shed light on this, and to, again, you know, fight against the brutality that police departments across this nation continue to plague our communities with.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Jay, Sam. Thank you, guys. We do actually have a video here, which I'll go ahead and try to share. Sam, I think this is a video that you might want to help, if you want to walk us through at any point or describe what we're looking at. I'm going to be sharing my screen again here. Content warning. Oh, sorry.
Can we do a brief introduction? Sam, can you tell us what we're about to be seeing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so essentially this video is a really good drone video of on May 31st on I-35, there was a big standoff with a lot of police and a lot of protesters. And that's where I was injured. And it shows, you can see my injury. I'll be able to point it out to you where I was and what happened, but just, it kind of gives the full scope of that series of events and how it was really nonviolent and showing the violence from the police.
Thanks.
Okay. So here we go. I'm going to. All right. So we see the crowd kind of dispersing.
So that circle, that's where I'm at with a black umbrella, and I start running away.
Okay.
Did somebody throw that tear gas back?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I know. So if you see, I go down and you see a bunch of people rushing over, and that's obviously when I was hit. I immediately hit the ground. Later on in this video, it does pan back a bit, and you can see me again, but that's kind of the bulk of it. So you see off to the right, there's people being attended.
So what just happened here? We have, they were firing rubber bullets. We have tear gas. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we actually, I don't know for sure what kind of, if it was a rubber bullet, if it was some other kind of less lethal round. But I know it was hard enough to break basically all the bones in my face, in the left side of my face, and blind my left eye. So it was pretty strong. Whew. You can see at the bottom, there's a bunch of people kind of around me before somebody takes me to the hospital.
Okay. Wow.
Ridiculous, man.
Yeah, that's intense.
Ooh. I wanna just give a quick shout out to the participants for being here and having this conversation with us. And also, we're talking about trauma and we're talking about police, and this can be re-traumatizing for people, right? So if you were out there, if you were seeing it, if you've got family who this happened to, I just really urge everyone who is watching this and who is experiencing this, and y'all, to like take care of yourselves. Like, if we need to have a collective breath, if you need to like step away, please do whatever you need to do in order to make sure that you're okay for this. This might be heavy for some folks. It was heavy for me, and I wasn't even there. Like, I can't imagine what it was for you, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, somehow I am able to watch this because also I kind of want to just know what is going on and which officer shot me, and were they, were they targeting me? Was it an accident? Was it recklessly shooting into a crowd? Charlene asked, was I knocked unconscious? That's a good question. I was not. When I was hit, I immediately hit the ground because I thought I lost my eye or something. I did not know how bad it was. But I thankfully was not knocked unconscious. I hit the ground and I yelled medic. I was calling for help, and a bunch of people, thankfully the kind of just natural ground response, that the solidarity that people had, just to help somebody out was really outstanding. And I was swarmed with people helping out.
Whew.
Wow. Thank you for calling that out, Nikia, that just the sight of what took place can be re-traumatizing for people. It can be intense. Jay, were you out there on that same day?
On that very same day. That's and I'm sorry. That's disgusting, man. Watching that video, my heart goes out to you, Sam, man. Like, that is something that we will probably relive for a good majority of our life. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is something that, I know for myself, like when I'm getting changed or anything, like this mark is going to be on me for the rest of my life. And it's a lot of people that were out there that got shot with rubber bullets. I got shot with beanbag rounds. And yeah, like I was shot that same exact day when I was hit. The same thing he said, I immediately hit the ground. I got shot from my left side. I don't know what officer shot me. Hit me right in my throat, immediately sent my ass off my feet. And yeah, the question was I there? I was there.
Yeah.
That's the same day I was hit.
And tell me, how did you first get involved in these protests? Is this the first time that you've gone out and protested in your life? Are these some of the first protests you participated in?
This is
before. Oh, this is.
Yeah, this is the very first, like, after, I think 2 days before I actually stepped out was, I had seen the Mike Ramos video for the first time. I saw the Mike Ramos tape for the first time. It was probably like May 29th or something when I saw it. And then like 2 days later, that's when I first stepped out. And first protest. And after seeing that video, that just infuriated me. Like, it took it to like the next level, because that's like, it's not Minneapolis, it's not Chicago, it ain't any other city. This is right here in Austin. So yeah, I was like, okay, I got to for sure bounce out now. And
And how about you, Sam? Was this a first time protesting, or?
This was certainly the most involvement in terms of a protest that I've ever been to. I mean, I think there was at some point there was like a climate protest, but it was in Austin that I attended, but it was much, much, much smaller. And there were some speakers. It was a lot more formal. So this was really the first time that things got to any level of seriousness. And yeah, similarly to Jay, I mean, thank you, by the way, for that solidarity. I know how you feel as well. It's, yeah, these lifelong scars and the long-term damage, people, you realize people get hurt initially and people kind of forget about it. But for us, it's the rest of our lives. Yeah. So thank you.
100%, man.
It's I feel like there's a way in which like what you're talking about sounds like veteran injuries, right? Like there's a certain bond that y'all have because you went through this process. Like this. I remember watching these videos because I was injured right before the protest. Like, I sprained my back, and so I literally could not be out there. And I was watching them, and I remember thinking that this was a war zone. Like, this looked like a war zone in Austin, Texas. And I could never have believed that would be something that happened. And y'all are talking about it like it was a war zone, right? Like, these are war injuries that you're talking about. And it makes me think of when you have veterans who have PTSD, everybody understands that that's trauma and it's really hard. And you get back in this place where you were at risk of injury, but those are people who left their homes and went overseas, that joined a whole system to be somewhere else and have that injury. And like, y'all are here. Like, this is your home. This is Austin, Texas, right? Like, y'all live here. Like, you know, we drive down I-35, right? The police who shot you, like, you might see them on the street, right? And like, not even necessarily even know it, right? And so I think that there's a whole nother level of trauma here where you're like, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? But like, y'all don't get to have a post, right? Until like we have some serious changes to policing, you know? Can y'all speak to that? Does that ring true for you? Is that not where you're at?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, first, just on the nature of the injury, just being kind of like a war zone. That's a good point. I mean, I definitely felt, by the way, in that moment that it was like a war zone. But the big difference is that, you know, the people that were across from me had weapons, had, you know, less lethal guns, had tear gas, which, as Charlene pointed out, is a war crime to use under the UN laws that the United States agrees to, and that, you know, ourselves as protesters, we were unarmed. I mean, I had an umbrella. That was my defense. I mean, that was the closest thing that I had, and of course, it didn't defend me anyway. But that was the closest thing that I had. So it absolutely it feels like a war zone. And moving forward, I mean, I had, you know, the police visited me in the hospital soon after I was shot. I didn't know why they were there. I thought, my first thought when they came was, this is their friend. They shot me and they wanted to take a picture and go and show it to them, be like, oh, haha, we got one. Like, you know, and because to me, my perception is that they're doing these things as fear tactics to scare people away from protesting, so that, you know, they didn't know who I was, but maybe they assumed I knew people there. And if they saw that I was injured, other people wouldn't go and protest again. So it absolutely felt like a war zone, but it's that we weren't soldiers. I mean, just, you know, completely defenseless citizens.
100%. I for sure, like everything you said about trauma. Like I definitely, like, even just watching like Mike Ramos's video, you know what I'm saying? Like I know exactly what he felt in that moment. You know what I'm saying? Like when I got shot, with the beanbag round, you just hear a pop and you drop. I immediately touch my neck. I look at my hand. I see blood. You don't know in that moment if I thought I got shot by a live round. I didn't know. You don't know in that moment. Right. I just pop, boom, I got hit. I'm looking at my hand. There's blood. Oh, damn, I'm dying. Like, I'm about to die. That was running through my mind. The same thing. Medic. Yo, I'm leaking. And Mike Ramos seeing that video of him getting shot and him like, oh, shit, like, I just got hit. Like, everybody knows fight or flight. I'm either about to run towards people that got ARs pointed at me, no, or I'm getting out of Dodge. You know, I'm getting out I'm shaking. And I like just watching that video, I'm like, damn, bro, I feel him. And then for them to like really do him like that, like, that's horrible. But as far as trauma, yeah, 100%. Like, even with Garrett Foster's death, I was right there. And somebody just speaking to trauma, like somebody had ran over, like the next day, somebody had ran over a juice box and it made a pop. And I was over there by APD and I was about to jump over the barricade on everything I love. Like, everybody, I was probably with 4 people and we were all there in that moment when it happened. And so everybody kind of ran. I was about to jump over a barricade and take cover. And like, when we figured out, like, oh damn, it's a juice box in the middle of the street, we all kind of like laughed. It was like a laugh, like, ha, like, damn, like, this shit really got us bent. Like, this is crazy. But yeah, trauma, like for sure. Like, we gonna take this with us for a minute. You know what I'm saying?
So, you know, I don't want to make you guys kind of constantly revisit the trauma, but, you know, since this is what we're talking about and we're here, the question I want to ask you is, you know, I remember the first times I experienced police repression at protests, and the first times that I experienced that kind of direct violence in Brazil and then here in Austin. And I remember the impact that had on my, kind of like the shocking realization that had on my whole worldview, right? And in my mind, when I think about this, I think this is true of all trauma, in a sense, it ends the world for you. It changes the world, right? There's the world before the trauma, and then there's this new world after the trauma, and you leave one world behind in a way. For me, that looks almost kind of like crossing a river. There's this place on one side, and then there's this place on the other after that experience, and it doesn't let you see the world the same anymore. So I wanted to ask you both about that. Like, what do the two sides of that river look like for you with regards to this experience? What was it like before going into that, and then how does the world feel different to you after that experience of trauma and protest? I know it's a big question. I like the big questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, when it comes to the world before, like, I always knew that, police brutality was a real thing. But, once you experience it firsthand, like, there was the shooting on May 31st, and then there was the arrest that I was brutalized. I got arrested on like June 27th. And they had brutalized me that same day. Like, they arrested me 4 hours later for, having literally my foot on the bottom stair at APD. And they got me for criminal trespassing. But they arrested me 4 hours later and threw me on top of my head, put a knee into my throat, threw me on top of the squad car, and all kinds of stuff. And so before the trauma, before all these instances, like, I already had like a mentality of like, I know that, a lot of these pigs is kind of after us, like, in a way, looking for anything for us to slip up on. But like, after experiencing and having them put their hands on me and bruise me and knock me up and shoot me and mace me, like, you move with a certain level of hypervigilance now, where it's like, even from the cops, even from the shooting, and like that same night when Garrett was killed and we watching him take his last breaths, APD shows up and starts pushing us back, get the fuck back, and pushing us and threatening to arrest us while we're grieving. Like, yo, like, yeah, we'll clear the area for paramedics to come through, but can somebody render aid to him? Like, you over here cussing us out as somebody that we marched with this man, we spoke with this man, he protected us, and you about to put hands on us? Like, that shit's traumatizing. Like, you just move with a certain level of like I be staring people down now. Like, I'm making sure I'm looking you until you are out of my sight. Like, I'm watching everything. I'm like low-key paranoid, like hella hyper-vigilant now, like of everything. It's a blessing and a curse, because even though I'm on defense like 100% now, it's just like, I know, like, I don't want to live like that. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to live like, I know that's not really like the healthiest way of living, of just always thinking of, all right, some shit can go left at any moment. But it's the reality of life and the world we live in at this point.
Yeah. I can second that, Jay. I know that feeling as well. I think so. One of the things I think it's also kind of important to keep in mind for everybody watching is that, I think for both of us, at least those initial times on May 31st, that was really, really, really early on. At least in Austin, a lot has happened since then. So at that time, that was really, Black Lives Matter in general as a movement was really just kind of springing into fruition. And I don't think anybody really knew how big it was going to get and how long it was going to last. So in that moment, I don't think any of us knew how significant it was going to be. So beforehand, when I went to protest that day, I fully expected to come home that same night. I really was not planning on getting hurt. I was not planning on putting myself in harm's way. I ended up in harm's way, and the after effects of that now are a few things. Number one, just due to the severity of my injuries, I am now even terrified of even going to protest, because I have to really take care of my right eye for the rest of my life, because that's the only eye that really completely works. And so if I were to be in a situation where, even if I wasn't even near police, but if I were, just if a police officer shot a less lethal round and I happened to be in the line of field, even if they weren't aiming at me, and it were to hit close to my eye, I would be permanently disabled, really. So, how Jay mentioned that he was able to go out again, like on the night that Garrett was murdered, I haven't even been able to do that because it's just too much of a risk for me. But I know that feeling of being that, that paranoia for other people. When I talk to other people that are protesting or going to plan to protest, I cannot overemphasize enough like taking extra safety precautions, wearing sunglasses, which when I was wearing sunglasses, those likely saved my eye from even more damage or other kind of damage, or bringing, like a plastic shield as a sign to hide behind if you have to. Being fully aware of your surroundings. I really get scared for other people now. I think even more so just because of that feeling of myself. And of course, I have all sorts of other things like reaccommodating to driving again, just due to vision loss. My whole, my future world now, I mean, it's totally I'm going to have to be coping just with the new normal for me.
Thank you both for that. Thank you both for that, for sharing that. Can you tell us, like, what was your view of police and policing before the protests, and if that has changed based on your experience and what you've seen? Because I mean, like, you were out there, which means that you had some idea that like the shit wasn't right? But like, do you feel like that has changed at all?
I'll take this one first because I think Jay is going to have a really interesting thing to say about it. But I know for me, beforehand, for many years, I've always deeply felt anti-racism, anti-capitalism, feminism, a lot of, strong environmentalism. A lot of issues have spoken really deep to me for a very long time. And I've always really been like a police abolitionist, a prison abolitionist. And so I can't say that it's even really made me more radical in that point, but it certainly has made it more personal.
Yeah, I can say like before stepping out, I was definitely like there needs to be a change. I didn't really have like a framework of like, the abolition, the approach, or like even like the funding approach. It was just like, man, there needs to be change. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be real transparency. I was coming on the sense of that, like, yeah, there needs all this that's happening, all this that's cracking off. Something needs to change. And coming out there, I was like, I went in there. What's crazy is I really went out there, and I've spoken on this a couple of times, like with the intent to speak and to have dialogue and have conversation with police, even though it was going to be passionate, even though it was going to be like, pretty tense. I wanted to have that and let them know, how I felt and how we felt and all this stuff. But, I really felt like a dialogue or a conversation needed to happen. But it really transitioned from dialogue and the conversation to, it's really like, lack of better words. It was really like, it's gotten to the point where it's F all y'all. And it's so sad to see that. I was like the whole peaceful, like, no, we need to talk. Like I was even kind of going to bat with fellow protesters, and I felt bad, and I apologized for that later on, because there was times where things would get heated and I would like in a way kind of silence certain people out of fear of losing that level of dialogue with the officers. I was like, hey, but we can't just be right like that right now. Allow me to have conversation just real quick and to speak with them. But after speaking, and then still getting shot, still getting maced, still getting thrown down, a knee in my throat, brutalized, all this stuff. And it just really just shaped me into like, just like, damn, like it really is like there's only so much good an individual officer or individual officers can do. You know what I'm saying? When there's the whole system, and that's the main thing. You can be a quote unquote good guy individual, even outside of the badge, but that ain't gonna do what the people are asking for when there's a system. You know what I'm saying? We talk about these good and bad apples, but the roots of this tree are rotten, and it has to be uprooted. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, man, like they already, a conversation, a level of dialogue, bro, they know what we want. They hear the people. So sitting down at a round table ain't gonna do much. Y'all know what the people want. It ain't rocket science. So, beforehand it was like, man, conversation. Now it's just like, nah, I'm realigning my vision to my people. Y'all know what we want. I'm here now. You know what I'm saying? And I'm staying here.
Even if every police officer in the United States was a good cop, a well-intentioned person, there would still be institutional police brutality, institutional racism, because it's, again, yeah, like you said, it's not about the individual police. It's about policing as a system, as a whole.
You know, it's interesting because this is something that came up in our social worker conversation too. You know, we were talking about the way in which, you know, sure, systems are made up of individuals, and individuals can be good or bad, but once they, you know, or some complex mix of the two, but once they are inside of a certain system, then they have to operate within the imperatives of that system. The system creates its own imperatives, so that it's like a game where we're all now playing by the rules of this game. And so the imperatives of that system limit and determine human action, right? And so that's the challenge, right? When we talk about, oh, good officers, bad officers, there's a moment that kicks in when a good officer or a bad officer is going to fire that same quote unquote less lethal round right at your face. And when that moment comes, it doesn't really matter who that officer is. They're going to fulfill that function. And this kind of goes back to the question of, you know, militarization. A lot of people say, oh, you know, the problem is we've militarized the police. But really, you know, talking about demilitarizing the police doesn't really begin to get at the problem, because once the core logic is we're going to use violence to control and repress and to address a whole range of social situations with violence, then, you know, why not enhance the tools of that violence, right? Why not take that violence to its logical conclusion and go all the way in that violence, so that you know, militarization isn't some kind of like an external process that's happened to the police. It just flows naturally from sort of the core mission of who the police are, of what they do. It's kind of like, I use the example, it's like a doctor can dress up like a clown and entertain patients, but that's not the doctor's kind of core mission, right? A police officer can go out into the community and have a barbecue or whatever, but that's not the core mission. The core mission is precisely what they did to Sam's face. And that's a tough place it's a tough realization. I don't know, Nikki, do you have anything to add to that? Or would you challenge that? Or
I mean, I'm just thinking about like, so yes, one, everything that you just said, absolutely. And the mission of policing, like we know that policing came into play as slave patrols, right? Like that was the origins of policing, and that's what they're still doing right now, right? Like they're trying to fulfill that mission of like segregation and oppression, right? I think that there's so many ways in which trauma and policing happen in these protests. Like I didn't go to the protest, and I just watched, and I was having secondary trauma. Like I had 6 different videos running at the same time on 3 different devices, because I was like, oh, I couldn't be there. Like, okay, I've got to be able to like sit and witness and all of these things. And like, I was like, oh no, this got me fucked up. I have to step away. And so I actually ended up stepping away right before Brad Ayala got shot, right? And I feel like of all of the police brutality, that particular one was, I feel like that shifted things. Like it's one thing to have plausible deniability of like, oh, you know, I missed my target, or I wasn't trying to shoot for somebody's head, which like, you know, like we can say that that's bullshit, but there's like a sliver of plausible deniability there. But when they sniped a 16-year-old kid that's standing on a hill that has nothing to do with these protests, and I think his hands were in his pockets, and like he's literally not standing by anybody, and like it was nothing but a blip on the radar, right? Like there wasn't, like we didn't even have the protests like we did for Garrett Foster, right? Like nationally, like it was only like there was nothing And I feel like there was a point where, for me personally, even doing this work, even knowing that like accountability is not a thing that like connects to policing, right? Like we are accountable for our shit and other people's shit, but police don't get to be held accountable for anything, right? Even with that, like I feel like in my brain there were still some parameters of like, no, there's a point where it goes too far, where like this is really too clear, and like that's not acceptable, and we all know that that's not acceptable, and like accountability will be had, and that didn't happen. And I feel like that not happening led to like, oh, this is a whole different game. Like the game is really like, this isn't some sort of like game of chess where like, you know, we've just got to make the right moves. This isn't a game of Go where it's like, we're going to have this high level strategy. Like the game is like, heads I win, tails you lose, right? Like the game is like, we got this. And I feel like that directly led to like having one of their boys, or like being real complacent when like somebody comes and takes their car and tries to run protesters over, and when that doesn't work, they like literally roll down their window and shoot Garrett Foster to death, right? And that happens with like that allows them to have this narrative of like, okay, well, you know, Garrett didn't shoot first. Like, but she didn't shoot at all. Like the fact that like Manley was like, oh no, he didn't shoot first. Like, really? Like the level of again, like there's just no rules. There's just no rules at all. Just really sank into me. And I know for me, like I was never gonna call the cops anyway, right? Like that's just not a thing that I'm gonna do, because I've seen too many videos. Like I know, like I saw like my grandma's, like and before my grandma's, there's like an infinite number of videos before that where like I see videos where people are like, oh, well, you know, my son had a mental health issue, and then the police showed up and kill him. And I don't even have a sympathy at first, because I'm like, well, what did you think that they were going to do, right? Like, and I had to back my shit up, right? And so, like, I feel like at this point, a lot of the trauma for me is just being able to, like, walk around and know that, like, if something happens to me, like, if some shit goes down while I'm outside of my house or inside of my house, like, that's not a protection that I get to have, right? And so, like, I'm wondering from y'all, like, how does that roll with you? Like, how does that, like, when you're at home, like we're doing this webinar right now, right? Like this is live streamed. Like somebody might see this and decide that like, oh, we gonna come fuck somebody up. Like, how does that sit? Like, did you ever think that you were gonna be able to call the police, and does that change those things? Sorry, that was a lot. I have a lot of things. I
definitely don't. I calling the police, especially on a Black man or anybody I really don't feel like that's just really not the answer, because police they're supposed to, and they're trained to de-escalate. All I've seen is them escalate shit. That's all I've seen them do is escalate things. They don't try to diffuse. They don't de-escalate. They don't try to use verbal judo. They are all about brute force and enforcing, you know, this level of dominance. You know what I'm saying? They're not there to bring things down to you don't see that. You know, I don't see that. I don't experience that. You know what I'm saying? We didn't experience that. You know, when you had and I because I'm at a level where I can talk about a lot of this stuff, like no matter how traumatic it is, that shit is therapeutic for me to speak on it. It does wonders for me talking about things that happen, because a lot of times we keep a lot of stuff in. So it's like, even with APD, like, you see people, like, we are literally watching him, like I'm watching his fiance like throw her body on top of him, and like we're watching this and like him fighting. You can just see in his eye he's fighting, and the one thing you do is you cuss at people, get the F back, and you threaten, like, you about to pull your gun on us, and like, get the fuck out the street, clear the road for like, I'm not calling the cops. You know what I'm saying? Like, instead of be there to de-escalate or diffuse the situation, like, they're not there to do that. I'm not calling the cops for my cousin or my friend that's having a mental health episode. You know, I'd rather put myself on the line and do everything I can. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, because I know how I'm gonna come. You know, like, you know, they don't, like, the whole hope, having faith or anything, like the little bit of hope I did have, if there was any, that shit is non-existent. 100% at this point. Like, nah, like, what do you put that uniform? What does that badge represent at this point to us, to the community, to people? Like, when is it exhausted people be heard when we say, like, we don't feel protected? Y'all the only thing y'all to protect and serve, we don't feel protected. The only thing y'all serve is misconduct, is brutality. You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that uniform represent at this point? I don't feel safe when y'all pull up. When I look over, I pull up at a light and look over, my palms are sweaty. I'm thinking of everything is my music too loud? Am I vibing a little too violently to my shit? Like, you thinking of everything I'm doing wrong instead of looking over and being like, all right, something's for sure not about to happen at this point. I got police right here. You know what I'm saying? How you supposed to feel? Man, I'm protected. I'm like, fuck, like, all right, shit, like, what am I doing wrong? Sweating and shit. Like, nah, bro. Nah, I'm not calling the cops. Nah.
Yeah. I know, I mean, I think it's really interesting how the kind of right-wing response to the city council's move to defunding police is talking about how, this kind of fear-mongering about, X percentage of murders have increased in Austin, where we're still the 14th out of 15th safest city, of large cities in the country. And you're thinking about how we canceled cadet classes. That's getting less legal criminals on the street, which is what these police are. I mean, I hope people are aware of, statistics like, on average, I think 40% of police officers are domestic abusers. We know as well that police just almost they very rarely actually prevent crime, and they're usually responding to crime. I think that there are some, even as somebody who envisions a world without police and would like to get towards that, I'm not in favor of just doing it immediately, because we need to build up the community in other ways first. But I still think there are very few scenarios in which I would actually personally call the police. If there was an active shooter, yeah, of course I'd call the police in that scenario, right? But thinking about, disputes between neighbors, like if somebody has loud music, if there is some kind of conflict that is not hyper threatening of people's lives, I think I personally believe in humanity enough to try to sort these issues out ourselves. We do not need police to be handling so many of these things in our lives. I really do think that we're better than that, and that just by calling police just kind of as a be all and end all thing is setting a dangerous precedent. And I still think that, again, we should be expanding when you call 911, we should have mental health first responders, we should have social workers, right? We should have specialists, so that if somebody is suicidal or if like I think Nikki was mentioning, if somebody has a child with special needs, right? I mean, we know about all of these responses to kids, on the spectrum of autism or whatever. It's just overall really bad. So I would almost never call the police myself. And whenever I see them, I'm worried that they may, like you mentioned, that, who knows who's watching. They might recognize me. I know, because there's an internal investigation into my case, which the police are essentially probably just sabotaging themselves. They're just actively not really trying to find out which officer shot me. I mean, I would like to know. And they know my address, they know my name, they know my face, they know my beliefs now. So I would certainly, even though I'm white and I am privileged in that sense, that I am not as fearful as a person of color, I would still absolutely not call the police, short of very few scenarios.
I want to say real quick to those who are joining us, to all the participants, we see your questions. Continue to share your questions with us. In just a moment, very soon, we'll open it up and invite some of you all to come in and share your questions and participate. But I wanted to go back to the moment, that video clip that we watched for a brief moment, because, a chant that I have chanted many times is whose streets are streets, right? And I think that's very much at play, even in these videos that we see, in these moments of confrontation between the police and protesters. There's this question about, well, who does the city belong to, right? Who has a right to the city? Who has a right to be in public spaces in the city? what kinds of acts of free speech are allowed in the city? Do you have to have, you know, a lot of money and a very expensive platform in order to make your voice heard? Or if you're just an ordinary citizen collaborating with other ordinary citizens, what are the avenues through which you can actually make your voice heard in the city? So I was wondering if you guys might speak to that a little bit. I mean, I know, Sam, you mentioned, you know, even just being fearful, having a hard time, even kind of imagining going out to protests because, you know, you can't risk losing another, you know, losing an eye or you know, that kind of harm. But if you could speak a little bit to that space of the street, of what was done there that sort of kind of removed you guys from being able to partake in that public space of the city.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's more important than ever. I think now, living in the age of technology, and especially in the days of COVID, we're so isolated. The streets are ours in every literal sense. I mean, not only are we the taxpayers, and by the way, so are undocumented immigrants. They do pay taxes as well. They buy stuff, right? They pay taxes. It is all of our streets. We, you know, we are very likely all members of the working class. We literally built the streets. I mean, who actually takes care of the roads? It's not wealthy people. It's everyday workers, right? And that is the great beauty of it. It is all of ours, and that is so key to us being able to practice our First Amendment rights. It is the most public space, which of course is such historical significance of any kind of broad social movement that has brought about change. People always think about, you know, the Civil Rights Act, or even workers' rights, right? I mean, even just, you know, child labor laws and OSHA laws. These things were not won by just legislation. They were won by legislation backed up by a lot of people marching in the streets, exercising their free speech and demanding improved rights. And so just because we're so you know, isolated and atomized, means that more than ever we really have to get together and show our numbers, not just to the people in charge that can actually make change, but to each other, so that we have that kind of collective consciousness and know that, okay, we really do have the power. Look how many other people are out here.
100%. I 100% agree with everything you just said, Sam. Because when it comes to it, man, it is like there's no lie in that chant at all. That's one of my favorite chants too. When we out there, whose streets are it is? We the people. You know what I'm saying? If this is a democracy ran by the people for the people, we know who these streets belong to. This is the people's. Like, you know, this is ours. The community. You know what I'm saying? And you know, and going back to the fear tactics, they want us to believe that it isn't. That's what they use. That's why they use the tear gas, the rubber bullets, the beanbag rounds, the mace, you know, the horses trampling people. You know what I'm saying? Like, they use these fear tactics to make us to strip away that sense of power as the people. You know what I'm saying? Because the people hold the power. We just got to realize it, and we got to really start moving like it and unifying like it. And amplifying each other's voices like it. So, you know, there's no, like, I feel like there's no debate in that question right there. Like, I like the question though, like, and what it presents. But yeah, it's for sure the people's streets. And I'm not going to allow fear tactics and intimidation tactics and old slave master tactics to deter me from knowing what that means and what this is. Because what they did to me on June 27th was that example of that. You know what I'm saying? You take somebody, because when I'm out there, I'm very vocal and very loud. And it's the same slave master approach. You take one of the loudest slaves or the strongest slaves, one of either the two, and you make an example out of them. Because what they did to me was completely just straight up excessive force brutality, you know? So they just to show everybody an intimidation factor. This is a reality, and it's an example of what will happen to you and what will become of you if you continue with all this marching shit, all this black lives, all this talk about power and unification. Let this be an example. You know what I'm saying? So the streets belong to the people.
I just want to reiterate, just touch on something Jay said, because I think it's really important to remind people the origins of police in the United States are fundamentally two things. Number one, union busting, and number two, hunting down slaves. Okay. And it's just, I think, you know, I think it's just really important to remind people that, because I'm not sure everybody's aware of that.
Yeah, 100%.
I think that historic context has grounded all of these conversations, and it's really important to constantly remember that.
I know what you're thinking about. I wanted to ask, so there's a couple of people who do have questions, and I do want to open it up. Lexi Bruner was asking, especially thinking about the comments that people have made about the virus disproportionately affecting communities of color, and portraying protests as hypocritical. So there's this question that I want her to be able to come on and talk to us about, but also before that, it makes me think about, so I missed the first protest because I was injured. And then after that, I was like, okay, no, you got, like, I'm immunocompromised. My housemate is immunocompromised. Like, I'm just not going to do it, right? Because I don't have health care. I don't have health insurance. And I was like, I can't afford that. Also, I know the rates of outcomes, right? Like, our healthcare system is not less racist than the police. And I wanted to know, kind of, for folks who are out there protesting still, what is the best support that we can give y'all? Like, what is the strategy? Is there a larger strategy? And what is the best support that we can give y'all if we're not able to actually come out and be there in person?
One thing to like supply, like, you know, and we have had that a lot. Like, you know, we've had people come out, and people that can't really be there and march and everything, just bring supplies, you know, masks, you know, face masks, all kinds of, like, you see the contribution. And it's up to the leaders as well, though, while we're out there, to enforce that, you know what I'm saying, to make sure that we're staying knowledgeable. But I mean, when you see pictures and stuff, videos going around, majority of us out there, like, I want to damn near, like, yeah, for sure, majority, like, we're all out there masked up. We don't play that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're going to be out here fighting for this, because, of course, we all know, like, we're fighting multiple viruses right now. You know what I'm saying? If not this pandemic, you know, we've been fighting racism, and brutality and mass incarceration, all this shit for centuries on end now. So it's like, if we're going to be out here really, really frontlining this, we got to make sure that we putting our health first. So, you know, we do have instances. I've witnessed it, like, too many times, of people, like, each other checking each other and holding each other accountable. Hey, put your mask on. And people blunt with it, like, hey, like, we gonna be out here, we yelling, but, like, you know, I know sometimes when I'm speaking, you know what, I move away from the crowd, and, you know, I kind of put my mask down so that way I'm heard. But, you know, for the most part, you know, we stay on top of each other because we move as, like, a unit. We move as a family, and you know, we all know that we hold each other accountable, you know, when something serious about a damn virus, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, as far as contributions, like, it's been happening, like, you know, just dropping off stuff, you know, rather dropping off food, resources, masks, you know, hand sanitizer. Yeah, people been on it. Folks been on it, and we appreciate it. To everybody that's probably watching, that is one of those people, I appreciate y'all 100%.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot of those things, I agree with 100%. There's a lot of, if you're immunocompromised, you should not go out. I mean, definitely not. But there are a lot of other ways to help from home. You can, again, like Jay mentioned, there are a lot of as well mutual aid networks, medic groups. There are bail funds. Again, I mean, both in Austin and nationwide. Dropping off water bottles, right? You know, medical equipment. You know, there are also, again, I mean, we just had a big victory, obviously, with the city council and defunding, and it was thanks to a lot of people from home calling into city council, telling their story, making their statements, saying their beliefs, right? And there's going to be more of that stuff moving forward. So there's always stuff you can do from home. But I do want to thank Lexi for bringing that up, because it is an important thing to talk about. Now, I know there have actually been studies showing that there's no correlation between the increase of COVID-19 cases. Actually, they've done it nationwide, but even if we're just going to talk about it in Austin, there's no correlation between an increase in cases and the protests. So what's likely happened is, because so many people stayed home quarantining, that's kind of offset any marginal increase of spread that may have happened. Again, this is outdoors. These are very, I mean, the vast majority of people wearing masks. So any spread that may have increased has been completely offset by all the people staying home. And more importantly, most of the spread that is happening are from people not wearing masks, that are people from going inside in restaurants or bars that have been reclassified as restaurants, et cetera. So there may be like marginally small amount of increased spread, statistically insignificant. And again, if you're immunocompromised, you certainly wouldn't want to go, but it's such an important piece of history that I think we all need to fight for, that these concerns are valid and that we should be taking those precautions, but that shouldn't stop us from going out.
Well, we have Lexi is here. Lexi, do you want to join us and turn on your camera or microphone and share your question? It's good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like I already touched on a couple parts of the question, but I guess it was composed of multiple thoughts. One is, obviously there's that tension between wanting to fight for police reform or abolition and also wanting to keep your community safe in a different way. So those things sort of live in tension with one another. And I was curious to ask y'all, as people who have protested, sort of, how did you make that decision? Did it affect your decision? How did you prioritize? And then something I've been hearing a lot is sort of the claim that because the pandemic is obviously hitting people of color harder, whether that's who's being exposed to it or who has access to the proper care and how they're treated afterwards. So I've heard a lot of claims that sort of gathering to protest is almost hypocritical because you're putting people of color at risk in the gathering itself. So I'm just wondering, like, how would you address that claim?
So I'm going to jump in here real quick and say one thing. I think one thing that's very interesting, and this is something that we discussed, we really went through this tension at AJC when deciding whether or not we should organize a protest, a march. I think one of the big difficulties is this claim that you're putting people of color at risk. It implies that there's some situation in which you can keep people of color safe. But the question is, what does safety even look like in a society where, in a world where you might walk out the front door of your house and be the victim of kind of sort of police brutality or police violence that might cost you your life, as in George Floyd's case. And so then all of a sudden, the very idea that you can keep people safe seems to be kind of troubled by just the reality of the other pandemic, right? The pandemic of racism. So, I mean, I want to hear what everyone else has to say, but I think there's a tension there around this idea of safety. What does that mean? How can anyone produce safety? I want to hear what everyone else has to say.
Okay, you on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to my approach, like there's definitely been a lot of growth on my behalf, because when I first came out there and after being shot and everything we've been through, I was mad at everybody that wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? So I was just like telling people, like, y'all need to be out here. I was a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of misplaced, fury. You know what I'm saying? So. But after knowing the realities of everything, and not being so tunnel visioned on just the fight that we're fighting, but just knowing that there's a reality of a pandemic and knowing that this fight can be fought in a multitude of ways, you know what I'm saying? And that's going to be a requirement. Like, that is something that needs to happen. It's not just having boots on the ground, but we need people, like my man Sam said, like people calling in, emailing. I'm applying pressure to city council, signing petitions, a lot of petitions going around. You can donate to funds, raising awareness, sharing videos, sharing statistics, educating yourself, doing your own research, checking your family members, your friends, having those uncomfortable conversations. It's like, as almost, you got to be an octopus when it comes to this fight. It's got to be hands everywhere, you know what I'm saying? And definitely take your own precautions. But when it comes to that approach, you just got to tell everybody to use their own discretion. You know what I'm saying? Because this is a very sensitive time. And that's all I can probably say is, hey, man, just use your own discretion. I'm not going to tell you got to be out here, but I got to, there has to be some sort of involvement for sure. because there's too many ways to be involved for somebody to just kick their feet up and be like, all right, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I can't be out there. All right, so, I'm just going to backseat this one. Nah, you can definitely be involved in more than one way, without having to be here physically.
Yeah. So I think, so JP's perspective I thought was really interesting, and I agree a lot with what you were saying. So I think one of the ways to think about it as well is that, obviously AJC was crucial in the Black Lives Matter movement in Austin, but it was also just, you're talking about the logistics of organizing it, and whether or not should we do it, is it putting people at risk, is this kind of, what kind of call are we going to make? But at the same time, it's also such a, it kind of came about from like even a worldwide kind of collective anger. So it's almost the case that something would have happened regardless. Some group would have, there was so much kind of years and years and decades, right, of anger, of injustice, that kind of, it was almost, these are how these large movements happen. It's not just that one group organized it and then and they just call a bunch of people and they just come. Yes, that's part of it, but again, like, this is due to so many people being enraged that they're going to come out in the streets regardless. But I also think that the other thing that I think it does is that I think it forces organizers to be even more careful about making sure that each protest has a purpose and that that is as impactful as possible. Because if there's just protesting for the sake of protesting, which again, it's important to keep numbers up, but having kind of a purpose and having goals, right, that you can meet and that you can show the progress. I think because of the fact that we're in a pandemic, and like JP said, what does safety even look like for people of color regardless, right? Yes, everyone could just stay home, but it doesn't mean they're going to be safer, regardless of the coronavirus pandemic. So I do think it has made people, yes, again, being extra careful, right? Outdoor spread with masks on probably can happen, but not really very much. But again, just making sure everything is as impactful as possible.
Thank you for your question, Lexi.
Thank y'all.
Wait, too. No, I think it's a really good question. And I feel like, to speak on what Sam was saying, like, having a larger strategy, like, how is this a part of a larger strategy? Because people are putting their lives at risk. They're putting their bodies at risk. They're putting their mental health at risk being out here, right? Like what Sam and Jay have already said and experienced, like, they're not the only people who are out there experiencing that, right? Like, Garrett Foster put his life at risk. And so if people are going to be doing that, like, how are we honoring that by making sure that we are maximizing the potential of that as much as possible? Like, how are we using that to move the needle as much as we possibly can on the fight against police brutality? And I think that if we're not doing that, there's a way in which we're not honoring those folks who are in the work that they're doing, right? And so speaking to what Jay was talking about, this looks like the only way a movement can work is if everybody can fit in it, right? Like, if everybody can see themselves in it, and whether that's like, okay, I can't be out here protesting, but like, there's something else that I can be doing, right? Like, I can certainly call my city council member. I can certainly be like dropping off water. I can certainly be participating in mutual aid networks. I can certainly be doing jail support, right? Like, what are the ways in which people can fit in here? Because I think that one of the larger things about these movements is that, like, it's not just the what, but the how, right? It's the what we're doing. We have to be modeling a better way of being inclusive, of being, of having that humanity, right? And if you have a movement that everybody can't see themselves, then you don't have a movement, right? Like, the idea is that we are able to imagine a better world, and we're going to start that imagination with how we are doing these particular things. And so that strategy and that making sure that everybody can be a part of it is critical, is a really critical piece for it.
I just want to add really quick onto what Nikki was saying. If you're somebody that really wants to help out, is worried, is maybe you're immunocompromised, but doesn't, or regardless, just doesn't want to come out, and you can't afford maybe it's just not really in your budget to be able to buy water or donate to a mutual aid network or to a bail fund, maybe if you don't have time to call city council, because I know personally from calling city council that it can take a
Howard.
lot of the day, right? I mean, if you have a job, you can't just ask your boss to get some hours off just to call. Like they don't care, right? So, but what you really can do, and it does matter, is even just talking to your family and friends and trying to change their minds. And it may seem insignificant, but it really actually does affect, you know, along the way. I mean, we now see, I don't think anybody would have thought that, you know, just Black Lives Matter as a whole has what, like 2/3, 3/4 of support throughout the country. And that's, I think, a lot of from, I mean, you have even just my parents, they would never have, you know, been so supportive of something like this if my injury didn't happen. And I know that they're talking to their friends who have also never been in that kind of thing. So even if you don't have the time and you don't have the financial resources, it really does matter just trying to convince people that, you know, reallocating resources away from the police towards EMS, towards mental health funding, et cetera, even just that really does make an impact.
There's two things that I want to say on top of that. One of them is that seeing the narrative change in real time. So like you were out there like on the street when they killed Garrett Foster. I was in my house, I was in my room, and I was trying to connect people with information because like I found out maybe 10 minutes later watching Haram's video and the ambulances were still there, and I was trying to tell folks like this is what's going on. Like people were like, what's happening? I'm like, this is what's happening. And I'm looking at the Reddit thread and like seeing the narrative switch in real time to some shit that's like, how, like, that's not even possible. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's so clear that this person tried to use their car. Like, it's on video in several different places that this person used their car to try to run people over. And when that did not work, you rolled your window down and shot somebody to death. Like, that was real clear. And watching it change to like, oh, well, he was shot because he had a gun. And like, what, like, wait, what? And like, he wasn't trying to run. Like, this guy, this was self-defense and like all of this craziness. Like, that narrative was astounding, and my brain like exploded, right? Because like I've heard of people doing this shit and like and seeing it like kind of from afar for different cities, but like having it here where I'm like, no, this just happened. Like, who the fuck are y'all, right? Yeah. Like that is changing this shit and like putting this whole different narrative out. And then I was like, oh, wow, y'all are just a whole bunch of white supremacists. Like, this is wild. And then later on that week, seeing like people who are not in my circle of friends, but my friends' friends on Facebook who were like, oh, but he had, no. So being able to like talk to your friends, talk to your family, and make sure that that narrative is not in anybody's brain that you know is super, super critical and important. And the other thing that I wanted to speak to was, Sam, you were talking about how your family didn't change their mind until your injuries. And I think that that's so fucking key, right? Because despite the fact that we had COVID and can't nobody be watching like football and basketball and all this shit. And so like all they can do is watch police brutality on TV and get mad about it. Like if police hadn't brought extra police brutality to the police brutality protest, if they hadn't decided that they were going to treat white people and reporters like they were Black, we would not be where we are right now, right? And so like, what does that look like? And like, how are we making sure that that is still a part of this? Because like, that's also traumatic, right? Because we know that when shit happens to us, well, you know, that's what happened. Like, just comply, right? Like, oh, it's a tragedy. Oh, it's a fucking hashtag, right? But when shit happens to white people, we're talking about police abolition at a level that we have never fucking talked about it. Like that it was unimaginable like 6 months ago, right? That like mainstream people are talking about police abolition, that they're talking about police defunding because they don't want to talk about police abolition, right? And like, this is not because of police brutalizing Black people and having it seen on camera, because that shit has been happening for years. This is because of police brutalizing white people on camera and like having that be going around. Right, and not just poor white people, but all white people who are bothering to come out and exercise those First Amendment rights. So yeah. I just want to say those two things.
I mean, to your point, Nikki, to be able to discover what police brutality is at a rally is itself a form of privilege.
Right.
Yes. To have to be at a protest in order to sort of get a taste of what that is itself a kind of a privilege. When that is sort of just the norm in other parts of town at other times.
Right? Like you get to go home. You know, you were like, oh shit, like they got me fucked up. I'm gonna just go home and just hang out in my neighborhood and not do that particular thing. And then maybe I don't have to worry about it. And I'm not talking specifically about you, Sam, right? Like I'm not trying to like pin that on you, but like there's a way in which like you get to be able to leave a particular situation and like not have to worry about that, and only like deal with that when you want to, or when you have to, or when you feel like you've got enough protection to go into that. Whereas like some people like Mike Ramos, he wasn't at a protest, you know?
No, absolutely. And I mean, again, I was obviously, I mean, I was always been aware of all, you know, police brutality, particularly against people of color, and all the institutionalized racism involved with that. But, you know, and you're totally right that so much of the attention would not have been had if it weren't for, you know, like those CNN reporters that were shot at, right? Who were white, obviously. And, but, you know, I think the other reason that also kind of made me want to come out even more, because I remember Chaz Moore was talking about how he didn't want to put more Black lives in danger. And that just made me feel like, well, okay, if that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but if a lot of Black people don't want to come out, if they're too scared to come out, then that means I have to come out, right? Because I'm less likely to get hurt. So if I need to put my body on the line, then so be it, because there is that, you know, there is that increased level of safety that I have.
Thank you for that. So I guess, should we try to bring on another question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lexi.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lexi.
Do we want to bring in Charlene? I feel like Charlene's been saying a whole lot of things.
Okay.
But we answered some of her questions though, so like Grace had some questions up here too.
Yeah, Grace, and I did want to invite Rebecca, who's actually Sam's lawyer.
Oh yeah, do the things.
Okay.
Go party, everybody coming through.
All right. Let's see if Rebecca's willing to join us. There she is. All right.
Hey, Drew.
Hi, Rebecca. How's it going?
So I can tell y'all how fucked up it is that APD doesn't even admit, right now today, in spite of that video, in spite of the fact that 2 officers came to Sam's hotel room and took pictures of his injury and, you know, should have had body cam footage
Hospital
of that.
room. Sorry.
Yeah, excuse me, hospital room. They still don't admit today that he was shot by APD. It's incredible. I feel so bad for people that are brutalized, because they hold all the cards even after they brutalize people. They hold the evidence. Like, Sam doesn't even know who shot him. And I know that they know who shot him.
Rebecca, is this your first time sort of representing someone that suffered a kind of physical injury or was attacked during a protest or using their First Amendment rights?
It is my first protest injury civil rights case. I also represent Brenda Ramos in her case. And I mean, just last week was the first time that I sued APD in a civil rights case, and that was in the AJ Griffin shooting that happened a couple years ago. So I'm fairly new to suing APD, but I was on the citizen review panel for years, so I knew about police killings here in Austin, and I have a lot of kind of institutional memory of that.
What are some of the main barriers you find that they put up to you in sort of trying to collect evidence, trying to sort of find any kind of justice in this process? What are some of the barriers that you've ran into?
I don't think they even would have bothered to interview Sam if I hadn't crawled up their ass and just been a real pain. And so they finally, take the time to talk to him last week for the first time. And this, like, the skepticism and I wouldn't say it was contemptuous, but like the detective who was interviewing Sam was a real asshole about it. Kept trying to get Sam to admit that he was standing in the way of someone who needed to be shot, was, you know, trying to get him to admit that he was injured by another protester. I mean, it's on video. And I am very sure that however many foam baton rounds were fired that day, and there can't be that many that were fired, right? That there is body cam footage of the person who shot Sam, and they lie.
Also, isn't it wild that like you can shoot like, how is there not accountability if like you shoot a projectile that can kill somebody? Less lethal, y'all, less lethal, not like okay, right? Like you're not shooting a
not non-lethal,
right? You know, like you're shooting a less. Why is it that you don't have to know exactly where each one of those things ended up, right? Like I feel like that should be a standard thing. If like you shoot something at somebody, you need to know where that went. Did that go into the place that you thought it was going to go? And like, how are you accountable for that? Like, how hard is that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't accept that they don't know. I mean, I do not accept that. That is, in my opinion, a lie. And, you know, on June 20th, they released 5 names. No one knows whether, who those people shot. I mean, I'll go ahead. I'll call it a cover-up. It's a cover-up. And it's really upsetting. So we're going to nail them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, I don't know if you see in chat, Lexi Linda Nuno might be a new client for you. So maybe y'all can connect afterwards.
And maybe Jay, I don't know.
Yeah, Jay, God, you need a lawyer. I hope you have someone good that you trust.
I got somebody.
I am so proud, y'all, to represent Sam. I mean, you're just incredible, and I hope that we nail the person who shot you in the face.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's bring Grace on.
Okay.
Also, I've been like trying to chat the attendees and failing, and I think I've chatted Jay a whole bunch and all the panelists, and like I don't know. But I'm actually gonna put a link to the Facebook page that this is streaming on, because y'all are getting a whole lot of love on there, and you don't have to look at it now, but like I want you to be able to have that for at some point in time. Yeah. Grace, do you wanna jump on? And you don't have to show us your face if you don't want to, but
also, if someone is watching us on Facebook, let me see how much time we have. We've got not a lot of time yet. If someone's watching us on Facebook and wants to join in or ask a question, you're still welcome to. There's plenty of space on Zoom here if you want to come in and join us. All right.
Grace, can you talk to us?
Yeah. Oh, hi. Hi. I had a kind of 2-part question. One is kind of a little more specific, but basically I work downtown, and one thing that I've noticed has happened multiple times is we have customers who will call the cops on unhoused individuals that they chill out around the store, and I know them by name, and like they're just chilling. They're not doing anything, but people, I guess for whatever reason, feel uncomfortable, and I've had the cops come, and I've come out and been like, hey, there's no reason to be here. There must have been a mistaken call, and they've been told like, you don't own the building, like this is like the building owner's property. It's illegal for people to camp here, blah, 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 blah. And where I get stuck is I'm like, I know that if I get angry with them, I could escalate or endanger the person who the police were called on. But I also know that if I don't do anything, then they're also in danger if they're taken to APD. So I guess my question would be, I don't know if there is an answer, but my question would be, do any of y'all have any advice as to how to handle that situation to where I'm not endangering their lives, or at least doing it in the best way possible? That's my main question, since that's kind of a pretty occurrence that happens more often than I would hope it would.
You know, I'm going to give you a part of the answer, and I'll let other people contribute too. But I think one of the reasons why we fought so hard and fight so hard to defund the police is precisely so that we can have services in place, city invested programs to address some of these challenges, right? Someone is having a crisis, someone is you know, homeless and needs assistance. Right now, there's almost no resources going to the most kind of vulnerable people in our city, and the police take up so much of those resources. So defunding the police is precisely trying to open space so that we can actually have some resources to address the kind of crisis situation that you're describing. But we're not there yet. But you know, this is an important step, because right now we spend way too much on the police as the only solution. So no wonder people call the cops. There's no one else to call, and there really isn't anything else in place. So I think now, as we, you know, took this first small but very important step of defunding a little bit of the police, we start to open up room in the city's budget to talk about really investing in other non-police alternatives. Unfortunately, that's still coming. It's still in the works. So, you know, it's tough. I don't really know what we have at this moment, but if anyone else wants to jump in and add anything to that.
I have kind of two kind of different types of answers. So, you know, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that there's still a lot of people who are trying to kind of recriminalize like these overnight camping laws in Austin, which is simply just targeting homeless people. So I'm a member of Austin, Texas DSA, Democratic Socialists of America. And one of the things that we have been working on recently, obviously in addition to the defund campaign, is there's a group called Save Austin Now, which is essentially a bunch of right-wing ghouls that were trying to get a ballot petition. It ended up that would recriminalize homelessness. It ended up failing, okay, thankfully. But just kind of to keep in mind that while we make victories, we may have victories in defunding, or at least improvements, there are still efforts out there to try to crack down on homelessness without actually solving it, without actually giving people homes or resources, or stop arresting them, right? So that's kind of the like institutional kind of as a whole answer that we need to, again, yes, we need to continue to try to fight and try to move resources towards building more homeless shelters, you know, and all of those things. But on an individual level for you, what do you do if they call the police and you're trying to de-escalate the situation? It's by no means easy. I think one of the things you could probably do is if you know that if somebody tells you as an employee that they're calling the police on a homeless person who's outside, I would just give them a heads up at the very least, and just be like, hey, I'm really sorry this person called the cops on you. It might get them, okay, maybe they have to move temporarily, right? I mean, there's no perfect answer, unfortunately, because really you're dealing with just a crappy situation. I would not try to talk to the police and try to change their mind, because I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's important that you're there if the police are are trying to kick somebody out of just the area. I would try to be there, maybe record them with your phone just in case something happens. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else has any other advice.
I do. I feel like this is a really good opportunity for power mapping and organizing. There is somebody who can tell the police that, like, no, like, y'all don't need to be here and this person has a right to be here, and you need to figure out who that person is. And maybe that person is the owner of the building. Maybe that person is your manager. Maybe that there is somebody who can make the decision, who has the power to be like, no, this person has a right to be here, right? And so finding out who that person is, and then also finding out who the allies are that you have in not only just your building and your office space, but like who are the other people in the buildings around you, who are the people who are in the community that are like, this person should have a right to exist in public downtown when they're not doing any harm. And how do you connect with those people to be able to build power and to be able to influence that person who said who thinks that maybe the police shouldn't or should be called to take this person away, right? So I think really doing that power mapping and being able to go, okay, who has the power in this situation? Because it's not you, right? Like that's clearly not what's happening, right? You might have a little bit more power than the person who they're trying to take away, but like that's relative, right? So like who has the power to be able to tell the police like, no, this person has an absolute right to stay here. Please run along. Please go somewhere else, right? And if that person is not someone who is already inclined to say those words and to have that framework, then who are they influenced by? Who is that person accountable to, and can you influence that person, right? So that's what I mean by power mapping. And I would say like you don't need to be in it alone, right? Anytime that we're like, how can I specifically just me do something, then you're already thinking of it from the wrong view, because we don't undo racism, and we don't undo capitalism, and we don't like unfuck these systems by ourselves. It has to be communal. So like, who are you working with, and what are y'all bringing to the table, and how are you power mapping to be able to change those things?
100%. I completely agree with everything you just said. Everything everybody just said, honestly, but I think that hits the nail right on the head when it comes to, of course, we all want to do things like and exercise like the amount of power that we can as an individual. But like she said, like, for sure, get everybody involved. Like as far as like how we encourage people to educate our family inside our own house and everything. And it all starts at home. It all starts at home based for you at your job. Educate your coworkers. And let them know, like, the amount of danger that this could arise from police coming to an individual that is just less fortunate, the same thing that, what she was saying is the neighboring stores as well, the neighboring restaurants, neighboring bars, and letting people know and getting in having conversation on prevention and being proactive when those kind of situations arise. Because again, on top of that, when it comes to de-escalation or when it comes to speaking to law enforcement, we all know that, white voices go a longer way than mine. If I were to try to speak to an officer, even though I come with, all the peace in the world, hey, sir, this individual didn't do anything wrong. Get back. I'm going to be most likely get met with a certain kind of energy than as opposed to if you were. So, just using that to your advantage. Like we all hear of the, people weaponizing their white privilege for the wrong reasons. We got to start weaponizing it for the right reasons. So, that's just my approach. And I agree with everything everybody's been saying so far.
Yeah. That collective people power really makes the difference. So, yeah, we've got to start using it.
Thank you so much for all your answers. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Somebody just said in the group, in the chat, using your Karen powers for good.
Yeah. Do you have enough time to bring Rebecca on? Do we do it?
I'm sorry?
Do we want to bring Rebecca on? Do we have enough time to bring Rebecca on?
Rebecca...
Again?
Questions. Rebecca Weber.
Oh no,
she's my lawyer. She was on.
Yeah, Rebecca Weber was on.
That's all right. All right. We're good.
That question was answered. Yeah. We have JC. JC, is JC still around?
JC and Charlene.
If JC wants to join us here, let's see if JC.
JC still here?
I don't think he's still here. I don't see him.
I'm sorry, JC.
Charlene?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. There we go. All right. Hope you're still, yeah, there we go. All right. Hello, Charlene.
You're on mute.
Microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I wasn't able to make it out that week either. I disabled. I was having a flare up of of pain that week, and people told me if you can't run, it's probably not a good idea to go down there. So, but what I have done is, for the last couple of years, I've made signs for protests, like we do. You know, when Ilhan Omar came here, I made some that said "Muslims welcome here," you know, and just so we could greet the people coming in. And when I heard about this wall of moms in Portland and I saw their picture, I thought, great idea. You know, these women are going out, you know, linking arms and putting themselves between the Black protesters and these awful stormtrooper cops. And I thought, oh, good, I want to do that here in Austin. And I was getting ready to make my sign that said, the Karens want to speak to your manager. So all of the police, you know. And then I found out that, you know, apparently something went wrong with Wall of Moms, that they, there was a lot of criticism. And I was doing a webinar with Lisa Fithian. And we didn't have time to fully really discuss that, but she said there was some criticism about them not including women of color, you know, to lead it. And so I was wondering, you know, just looking back on it, how could they have done differently? You know, did they, before they even started, should they have looked for some women of color and said, hey, we want to do this? Do you want to, you know, because I think they've formed a 501c3 or something now, but just like in that moment, I mean, you know, I see this stuff going on and I'm like, I'm ready to go out there with my Superman cape on right away. So I don't know how much time there was to really formulate anything like that. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to say some words on this.
Okay.
Yes, one, shout out to Lisa Fithian. She's dope. She's a good friend of mine. But yeah, there were some issues with the Wall of Moms, right? And part of that is who gets to be called a mom, right? Because Black women have been doing this work forever. And nobody calls them mom, right? Like we are angry Black women, right? Like that is not a thing that we could, nobody's calling Michelle Obama mom, right? Like that is not the role that she gets to play, right? And so that's one thing, and that's one of the reasons that Wall of Moms had some issues. And two, I think that like there's a very well-meaning thing where it's like, okay, like we should have this organization and we should go find some Black people to like lead it. And it's like, no. The idea is that like they've been doing this work already, right? Like this is not new work, right? Like they've had moms out there doing this work. And so the idea is that like reinventing the wheel, but just in a white way is not the way to do that, right? The idea is go and find these women who have been out here doing the work, go and find these people of color who are already out here doing the work, go and find these Black and Indigenous people who are out here doing the work and help them do that work, and don't like create a whole new thing and be like, we're gonna do this, right? And I think that like there was definitely some internal shit that like fucked that up, but it's also a really good example of how how the media responds differently to white people doing a thing than it responds to Black people doing a thing, right? So like you've got these people who are out here, even the people who they interviewed who specifically tried to recenter the conversation and say, this isn't about me, this is about those Black people who are having the shit beat out of them by cops, right? Like who are being brutalized by the police departments. Even then, like those media stories were still spun in a way where it's like, oh, they were so great. We're so glad that you're out here protecting these people, right? And like the focus is on these white people. So like what I was talking about before, where police brutality didn't get everybody out. Police brutalizing white people got these people out here. Got all these protesters out here, got all this defunding, right? So like it is based on all of this foundational work that Black and brown people have been doing around police and prison abolition for years, right? But there's this narrative that is based in white supremacy that like, oh, we can come in and we can do this better, right? Like we can do this. Like this hasn't been done before, right? And I think it's really critical to be able to like analyze those things, right? And not saying that like these are bad people, like they were clearly very well-meaning and wanting to help the protests, but like the white supremacy is in like we are swimming in it all of the time, and it comes out in all of these little ways, even when people are trying to do the right thing.
Right. I thought of it though. I mean, if you have a wall of white people, now maybe I'm naive. Maybe the cops just like can't remember his name, was shot in the face. Like it used to be, it seemed like the cops are going to be less reluctant to come after us. So to me, it would make sense to have the white people there, you know, as kind of a shield.
Yeah.
But I guess their mistake then was not in redirecting the media when the media came to them. Like
that's part of it, right? But it's also like, who did y'all consult before coming out here with this idea? Like, did you talk to Black people? Did you go, hey, like, this is where, like, what are the Black organizations that they've connected with them, or like, hey, like, where can we fit in? How can we best serve this, knowing that like police are less likely to brutalize our bodies?
Right.
Like, how can we connect with y'all? How can we take direction from you in order to do this work, instead of like, we've got this idea and we're going to come out and do this thing, right? Like, those are two, like, you're censoring different people with that, and like there's a certain amount of paternalism about that as well, right? Because you're coming into a Black movement, right? Like, this is a Black foundation movement. This is the Black Lives Matter, and you're like, we're gonna do this thing, and it's like, how about you ask a question first, right? Who are you taking direction from? Like, why is it that you're coming into this space that like we're protesting police brutality, and we've been doing this for a really long time, with your own ideas of how things should go down, instead of being like, hey, what's already happening on the ground, and how can we help those things?
Right.
And
do other folks have thoughts?
No, that was wonderful. And the only thing I have my 2 cents that I would add to that is that it really shows the limits of the very use of the concept of whiteness when mobilizing towards a collective struggle for liberation. So when we say, oh, you know, use white privilege and all that, there might be a place for that. But for me, ultimately, what white people really need to do is learn to give up that privilege and try to and find the courage within themselves to release that power, as opposed to trying to just use or weaponize that power, because that the uses for that kind of whiteness as a special power in society, when it comes to a movement that is trying to really produce a bigger liberation, are incredibly limited, right? Because inevitably, you know, the kind of white anti-racists motivated by the best of intentions ultimately end up sort of recreating new structures. And then all of a sudden you have this problem of the white savior, right? So, and it's the white devil and the white savior both kind of coexist in this. They both play a role in this story, right? So it's not enough to sort of find some way to redeem whiteness. We need to actually get outside of that, outside of and beyond whiteness. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Charlene. We appreciate your question.
Thank you.
So I feel like I just need to tell everybody else that I love it when JP talks. Like, I feel like I told him before that his words are like a whole bunch of butterflies, and sometimes if I try to catch them all at one time, like, I'm too slow. But if I just like let them alight on me, like, I can just marvel at them and experience their beauty.
Oh man.
So I know it's 7:40. I think we told people that it was going to go until 7:30, and we never ended on time before, but I want to check in with our panelists and see how Jay and Sam are doing.
I'm doing good. I'm chilling. If we want to keep going, that's cool with me.
Okay.
Doing excellent. I love the conversation. This is fruitful, so I'm all for it.
I think we're nearing our conclusion here. It might be one last question if we do one.
I don't know what's happening with Jeff.
Yeah.
I mean, I could answer. I think JC Bitonti, who asked the question, is probably gone. But if we want, I mean, I'm happy to answer that too.
Yeah.
I think we could just do that. So the question was, would you have imagined back in May that APD would have a third of its budget cut come August? When did a list of demands for defunding really galvanize? And for those who were badly injured, did the announcement bring any sense of vindication to you? And just a quick point of clarification, AJC didn't have a third of its budget cut. APD, oh boy, APD had approximately 5% of its budget cut. What did happen was the beginning of a process of decoupling, where we're going to be looking at a number of departments and services that are currently being done within APD and looking at ways to transfer those to new civilian-run departments. So that process of decoupling, plus the cuts, plus what is being called reimagining, where we're looking at things like K9 units, mounted patrol, and a number of other things, and finding out, okay, well, do we really need these? I think no, answer no, but we're gonna find out together as a city if we need these things and then move on. So that whole total package looks like about a third, right? So it's really the decoupling part. But I think it's important to clarify that, because that narrative is going around and we need to be clear about that. So in terms of actual budget cuts, that was a 5% budget cut to APD. But now for the rest of the question, I'll let Dawn answer it.
Yeah, thank you. No, that is an important clarification. No, thank you for that. So yeah, I mean, just one thing to keep in mind, because again, there have been so many groups like AJC and many individuals and other groups as well, who for many years have been trying to defund the police and reallocate resources, right? But I know that, I mean, even a year ago, I think it was about a year ago, Greg Cassard tried to argue for getting, instead of like 30 people in a cadet class, to get 27 people. They couldn't even cut 3 people, because the council just didn't have, they weren't thinking in that way. And now, so to have anything even close to what we achieve now, I think it is an enormous accomplishment. And thanks to AJC and other organizations as well for the leadership and all the people that called in and emailed and all the work that everybody did. So I think there's a lot of work to still be done. I mean, really, we have a lot more to do, but I think everybody should pat themselves on their backs for the accomplishments. And so I can't really answer when did a list of demands for defunding really galvanize, because that's kind of I think somewhat nationwide kind of thing that happened. I can't really answer that, but for those of you who are badly injured, did the announcement bring you any sense of vindication? Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was to, if I had this injury, which is giving me permanent lifelong damage, and if nothing came out of it from in terms of taking some power away from APD, I mean, it would have been so incredibly depressing. Just feeling like I got shot for nothing, right? I mean, not that it was like worth it or anything like that. I'm not trying to make that claim that I would do it again, but if anything positive can come out of it, like this, if that in any way kind of helped tip the scale a little bit, then great. So it really, really deeply, I mean, when the votes passed, I mean, I started crying. It was just deeply, deeply important to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on that same tone as well when it comes to everything me and you, Sam, have been through, like even just being out there. If like nothing would have came of it, I don't know. I don't even want to think about that. But I just know that like it was for sure relieving in a sense. It was for sure refreshing in a sense. It was after so much brutality, after so much, senseless acts of excessive force and witnessing people literally die and the literal blood, sweat, and tears that was shed on these streets being out here. If nothing would have came of it, bro, I don't know, but it did. It was a sense of refreshment and nothing, like it's far from, the fight is far from over though. Far from it. We still got Garrett's murderer out there, literally, like right now, not even, behind bars. We still got charges to be dropped. We still got officers to be fired and charged and prosecuted. We still have, so much, what I'm saying? There's still more money that needs to be reallocated. There needs to be community reparations for the centuries upon centuries on end of our communities. The same energy that these cities across the world and this nation has benefited off of our people's oppression, they need to use that same energy to do the exact opposite and uplift and pour money into our communities. That has always been like a no-brainer to me. If you are messing somebody up, if you know that, okay, I did this person dirty for years, and now I apologize. Okay, there needs to be something that comes of that. You know what I'm saying? Like you taking accountability. This nation has just said, okay, sorry about the slavery, sorry about the mass incarceration, stripping your fathers away from your neighborhoods, sorry for the crack epidemic, sorry for redlining, sorry for police brutality, falsified police reports, racial profiling, the harassment, and this, that, and the third. Good luck. You know what I'm saying? Nah, bro. There's so much, and I ain't gonna settle for it. But it is like Sam said. This is like a like a breather. You know what I'm saying? Like a nice little breather. But it's time to continue to apply pressure for sure.
Yes. Thank you for that. Do y'all have closing thoughts? Like, is there anything that you haven't said that you feel like you need to say and you need people to know? Whether it's about protests, whether it's about your particular trauma with policing, whether it's about how we move forward.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to follow, Jay. That was powerful. Damn.
It's real.
All I can really say is to keep fighting. Keep fighting. Keep educating yourselves. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. When it comes to, for anybody out there that might have been in that same spot where I was, where a conversation or dialogue, we need to sit down and speak to these people and change the hearts of. When it comes to this approach of we need to train more, you can't train somebody to be calm. You can't train somebody common decency. You feel me? Like that's something that is just like, that's a heart issue. You know what I'm saying? So at what point do we say, all right, look, this has failed us since literally the inception of policing? Okay, it's time that, of course, it's not overnight, like Sam said. I don't believe in like abolition just overnight, boom. No, of course, we need to start gradually making those steps and holding our council and holding our city officials accountable, and continue to apply pressure. But, if we feel like there is any level, if you're ever in that position of needing, and that is the answer, is to have dialogue, they know what we want. They know what the people want. Trust me. They know what we want. They know what we have been fighting for, marching for, bleeding for, sweating for, screaming for, everything. You know what I'm saying? No level of conversation is going to just make them wake up one day. This is a system. This is a system, people. And it's failed us. It's taken lives. It has completely ravished our communities. And we are still growing from the pain. We're still growing from this. We're still growing from, the domino effect of the crack epidemic and the domino effect that caused of fathers being out of households. Now I'm growing up and now I'm teaching my son everything that I learned from the streets. We're still going through that right now. You know what I'm saying? So, when it comes to where I'm realigning, I'm gonna end it off like this, where I'm focusing is all the hard and uncomfortable conversations that we are having with other races. As speaking as a Black man, all these uncomfortable conversations that we're having with other races, as Black people, we need to really start having these uncomfortable conversations with each other, from Black man to Black woman to Black man to Black man, and start doing. We got a lot of unlearning to do, a lot of healing to do as a people. And you don't fight a fight and then unite. You unite and then fight. So again, I appreciate all the unity that's from the outside, but it's like we got a lot of unification, restoration, and empowerment within our community. That's where my focus is. I love all the unity. I love all the love, but yeah.
I feel like your words are gorgeous. You and JP both. And Sam, like, it's been so good to have y'all on. This is so good. So good. JP, do you have closing thoughts?
The only thing I would say is really just kind of echo what Jay already said so beautifully, but remind everyone that, it's great to celebrate these like wins that we've just had, but this is far from the end. This is just the beginning, and we've got to find a way to keep the momentum up. I know that these movements often have a kind of life cycle where we see a sort of an upsurge of public interest, and then things sort of start to fade as people kind of get back into what they think is their routine or their everyday lives. We can't afford to let that happen. If that happens, we're going to lose even these few wins that we've managed to conquer. So we need to find creative ways, not to burn out, not to, burn ourselves into exhaustion, but find sustainable ways to really keep this momentum alive and say that things are not going back to normal. That there's a whole new normal that we're going to start to build, and it's going to look very different. So that's my challenge, I think, for myself and for everyone every day, is like, let's not just let things sort of settle back into what they were, but keep this movement going.
Yes, also beautiful. I feel like my parting thoughts are on the lines of trauma, and that like this work is not easy, and that it is critical for us to be able to take care of ourselves and others, and it is critical for us to be able to have mutual aid and depend on each other. I just saw Sam extend a communication to Jay saying like, hey, do you want to talk later and like be connected? And I feel like it's so important what Jay, you were talking about, like being connected to our communities and making sure that we ain't fucking up over here, right? And then trying to go have that fight. How are we maintaining our humanity in the face of all of this? Because it is real easy to lose it, right? And that maintaining our humanity builds resilience for this. And so like, how are we making sure to continue to do that while we are out here with these cops that are shooting us, while we are hearing what's going on, right? Like being able to make sure that we are staying connected is so key. And I hope that we're able to continue doing that in this movement. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Very, very pleased. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all, man. Y'all be safe.
See y'all Wednesday. We're coming back. We've got another conversation lined up for next Wednesday. Don't miss it.